Okay, so you followed last week's episode and you sent a bunch of emails and messages out, and you've got someone who's interested in having a conversation. Now, what do you do? So often we get onto these conversations, we have a quick intro about each other, we ask a bunch of questions, and then we're like, okay, bye. That is so common. So, today we're going to talk about what to do when you get on these one on one calls. How do we turn a regular networking conversation into a call that could potentially help you get to your offer? Are you ready? Let's get into it. Hey there, this is the Uncommon Career Podcast, and I'm your host, Patricia Ortega, and I'm here with you every other week to check in on your job search, motivate you for getting to that interview, and today I'm helping you get into networking conversations and finish those networking conversations well. A couple of things to remember before we get started here is that in these conversations, instead of focusing on, I hear this a lot. Let me kind of backtrack a little bit. I hear this a lot that I don't feel like I'm being genuine because I'm reaching out because I need a job. And so that gets us all in our head. And when you're reaching out specifically because you need a job, it makes you feel manipulative. It makes you feel not genuine. It makes you feel like it's not an authentic conversation. But if you were having this conversation just a couple of weeks before you realized that you had to find a job, it would be a completely different conversation. And so that's what our goal is today is to shift gears to look at it from a different perspective because this is the same network, the same relationships that you are going to be developing whether or not you need to get a job right away. Right. So, what we're going to do is focus on tapping into the other person's knowledge and wisdom and insight and experience. And we're going to be looking for hidden insights, that inside scoop. And we also want to communicate our genuine interest in the field. And just because you're not connected to a company right now doesn't mean you're not going to be connected to a company and its resources and its network later on, because that's why you're in the search to get into a new position. And so the goal here is to come to the conversation knowing that you have something valuable for them, just as they have something valuable for you. You have a network of other people in the same field. You have a, career history at different companies. You have an interest, knowledge, skill set, ideas, and insights that come from that same field as well. And so you can share war stories. You can talk about, frustrations in the field and best practices and challenges that you're experiencing. All that to say, your conversation starts with your frame of mind. That's the very first thing I would tell you is get into the right frame of mind. If you're feeling some kind of way about networking, that's the first thing that has got to be dealt with. So think about it as you are someone who, whether or not you're searching for a job, either way, you have value that you're bringing with you from your career and you're growing your network of folks. That's not just for right now because you need a job. You are growing a career network, a field of people that are going to continue to be um, in your sphere of influence, right? Okay, so let's get into this. Your mission here is to build real and authentic and ongoing relationships and to intentionally prepare your communications. That's what we're going to work on today. How to intentionally prepare your conversations and your communications so you can gracefully and smoothly navigate and help to drive the conversation so that they get what they came for, which is insights and another networking partner, networking colleague. But in addition to that, you also get what you came for, which is you want people to know what you have to offer, how you can support and contribute to an organization, and what you're currently looking for. And along the way, you're going to learn what they want to do next. So they might be in a position right now, very happy at their company, but everyone has a next step that they want to reach. And so you want to keep that in mind. What is their next step and how might I help them when I do land at my next role? For right now, though, let's start by letting the pressure roll off so that it doesn't have to be attached to an outcome, meaning you don't want to go into the conversation feeling like it's not a win unless you get an offer. It's not a win unless you get invited to apply. It's not a win unless they happen to be hiring at their company. So often, clients are starting their networking and as we all would, as I would too, you know you have an ultimate goal. And so you're looking for people to network who might be able to help you get to the offer. And while that can feel really efficient in the beginning, it actually taints your networking efforts. So the best thing to do is to come into this without a specific goal in mind, but more to say, I just want to meet a lot of people, get to know who they are, what they offer, and where they want to go next, and let them know who I am, what I offer, and where I want to go next. And at the end of that conversation, because I am actually in a search, I'm going to send out my resume just very casually in case something were to come up. And now you have another person who's an advocate who knows you and who's got your resume. All right. So, last thing before we really get into this, I encourage you to think about questions you really, truly have about your next move. So, before you get into any kind of one on one conversation, really sit down with yourself and say, what questions would help me not only to get the offer, but to advance in my career, right? What's the next position that I truly want? And what questions do I need answered to make sure that I land in the right place? This is going to help you to focus on true information gathering, true networking, and less on fishing for that outcome. All right, I think we're ready. So here's what we're going to do. One of the most important things when it comes to getting into that conversation and just feeling free to have a conversation while also guiding the conversation is that you want to be in conversation with the right people. So at the very beginning, you want to figure out, okay, I wrote down my questions. I figured out what I needed to know. The next step is figuring out who has answers to these questions. Not who has my offer, but who has answers to the questions that I need to get really clear on so that I can communicate clearly and get to the offer when I do land an interview or when I do get a screening or when I do get a chance to talk to a hiring leader. So get really clear on what questions you need answered in order to get to your offer. And then get really clear on who are the best people to answer these questions for me. Now, you're going to realize that oftentimes you have warm contacts, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about the cold contact. But let me just pause real quick. If you have warm contacts who can answer these questions for you, of course, they are your very first stop because you're more comfortable with them. You're able to ask questions a little bit more directly and they know you. So they're going to be more willing to help you. Okay, so now let's say you are in the conversation, you're about to dial in or zoom in, whatever it is, right? And you get on the conversation. How exactly do you move it from more casual conversation to a more career driven conversation? Well, here's the thing. We sometimes think it has to be such a career driven conversation that, again, it's attached to an outcome at the end. But the goal is to introduce the career conversation, see if it happens to take, see if the conversation continues to go in that direction, but leave it flexible enough so that the other person doesn't feel like they are being driven, more so like they are being invited into a conversation that maybe they are interested to have as well. So there's 5 steps that I typically help clients kind of move through when it comes to networking. The first one is building rapport and sharing your intent. And we'll go over these in more detail in just a second. The second one is asking questions and showing your investment, showing that you put in the time. And again, more detail coming in a sec. The third part of the conversation is where you begin to align your value. The fourth part of the conversation is when you invite and or seek buy-in from them. And the fifth part of the conversation is where you start to close things up. You want to talk about next steps and make sure to leave the door open for future conversations, resume, etc. All right, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Step 1. This is where you build rapport and share your intent. So, what this looks like is in step 1, think about it as the first couple of minutes in your conversation. Your goal here is to set a really relaxed tone. It's to build rapport and to help frame the conversation. The goal is for people to be able to sit back and say, oh, yeah, this is going to be a good conversation. And sometimes, especially for people like me who tend to be a bit more on the skeptical side, you think, okay, I have this one on one call. But in the back of my mind, sometimes there's this thought that, oh my gosh, this person is expecting me to have a job offer for them. That bit of pressure can kind of stress a person out. And so, in this first part, because you want to set a relaxed tone, build rapport, and frame the conversation, this is where you might introduce the fact that, hey, this is just going to be an insight gathering conversation. I just want to get to know A, B, and C, and I have a couple of questions. The point is that you let them know right off the top that you are not there to get necessarily a referral or an offer. Now, can you do that? Absolutely. There's a time and a place for everything, but that's just not the conversation that we're having right now. Okay, so building rapport and sharing your intent might sound something like this. Hey, Sally, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today. I know that your time is valuable, so I'm going to keep this really, really short. I reached out because I'm in the middle of a career pivot right now, or you might say I reached out because I am currently in a job search right now and your career path caught my attention. I would really love to hear how you navigated your journey and to get a couple of insights as I continue to explore my next steps. From here, make sure and leave a pause. You want to let them respond, and leaving this pause, even though you might feel nervous and might want to fill the silence, you want to leave the pause to give them time to absorb what you said, to respond, and to let them decide if the conversation needs to take a slightly different turn or whatnot. And that's how you can begin to just kind of really hear what they're there for in the conversation, whether they use words or not. Okay. So, yeah, number one, build rapport and share your intent. Your goal is to frame it as a learning conversation, and that's going to make them more open, more relaxed, more willing to have a genuine conversation. Okay, so now we move into step two. Step two is where you start to ask questions and show your investment. So during this second part of the conversation, you've already let the person know, hey, you can totally relax because I am not going to be grilling you for a referral. In this part, step two, this is where you start asking questions. Now that they're more relaxed, now you're like, okay, let me learn from you. I would love to hear your wisdom and insight on A, B, and C. Now, if you're coming at this as more of a peer to peer conversation as opposed to maybe like a mentor mentee conversation, you might say something slightly different. You might say something like, hey, I'm going to get right into this. The first question that I have came up when I saw that you've been in this field for X number of years. And I saw that you also rose quickly through the ranks and transitioned from X industry to Y industry. It's really interesting to me because I had a similar experience in, ABC, whatever industry you're in. And then you can say, and I'm curious to hear your experience. What led you to this company? So, how you frame the question will determine if you are setting this up as a mentor mentee conversation or if you're setting this up as a peer to peer, let's share experiences. Now, in this second portion, this ask questions and show investment, your goal here is to make them feel valued and to find common ground by truly listening to their story. There is something special that happens when you truly listen, and not just like hearing the words that they're saying, but hearing what's not being said, hearing how they're sharing their story. At what points do they get really excited or interested? At what points do they seem to de emphasize or maybe not be as comfortable about? Like, really listen to the undertone of the story so you can be present with them and help them to feel heard. Because when someone feels heard, they feel more invested in hearing your story as well. Okay, now as you're listening, you might acknowledge their response with something like, wow, that really makes so much sense. I love that perspective, especially because A, B, and C. And what you're doing is you're pulling a piece, you're pulling a thread from their story, especially pieces that were important to them that also resonate with you. You want to make sure this is genuine and authentic. What we're having here is a real conversation. It's just that sometimes we need to see what it looks like in practice to be able to say, oh, that's what you meant. That's what a networking conversation is supposed to look like. All right. So the goal here, we're building rapport. We're letting them know that we see and understand the work they do, the value they bring, and that it resonates with us as well. Okay. So now step one, step two are taken care of. Let's hop into step three. This is usually the step people don't get to. If you're having a one-on-one conversation, you say your hellos, you ask a bunch of questions, and then the call kind of just ends and doesn't go anywhere, then step three is where you want to start to make a pivot and want to implement that into your conversation. And step three is to align your value. The goal here is to shift from gathering insights from the person that you're speaking with. You want to shift from that to aligning your experience with what you are hearing. So you might say something like, wow, that's really insightful. I've been in the manufacturing industry for over 5 years. And now that I'm looking to grow in operations or supply chain or whatever it is, now that I'm looking to grow in this area, this is absolute gold. Thank you for sharing that. What I'm moving towards right now is I'm actually trying to get into, you know, management, whatever the role is, my first director role, whatever you're going to say. And I'd really love to hear your take on what makes someone stand out as they get into these positions. So, what you're doing is you're pulling from what they're sharing, what's important to them already, and you're weaving in your experience, you're weaving in the role that you have, the industry that you're in. Notice how we dropped those pieces in, and you also dropped in our example here, the role you're interested in next. So you just give them all this information while still keeping the spotlight on them, while still letting them know I'm in your conversation and your experience, not pulling you out of that and bringing you into like what I need, what I want. The good thing is that this is going to help them to understand your experience while also staying engaged in the conversation. So, if they then ask about your experience, right, when you say, I'd love to hear your take on what it takes to make someone stand out in this field, they might be like, oh, I didn't know that you were interested in XYZ role in the same industry that I'm in. If they ask about your experience, you want to share just a really quick, super brief, relevant story highlighting your strengths. This is not you now starting to share your career history or doing your tell me about yourself. This is like one sentence. This is a very quick part of a two-way conversation where the focus is still on them. So you might say something like, oh yeah, at ABC company, I led XYZ initiative and it resulted in, a 25% decrease in cost. I just love working in these efficiencies and I'm excited about taking the next step, even more so now that you and I are talking and I'm learning that this is really a good fit for me. So again, see how we're pulling some pieces from our experience, but we're staying in their context. Okay. Now, the goal here is to help them see how you fit into their world, not how you've got your own world going on and you need something to make that happen. So that's a very big point here is you want to stay in their world. At this point, you've built rapport and you've shared your intent. You've helped to relax and frame the conversation. And step two, you ask questions and you've shown your investment in them. You've helped them to feel heard and valued, and you have found common ground by listening to their story. And you've also began to align your value, meaning you're starting to drop small pieces of information while still staying in their story. And at this point, they may have asked about your experience, but if they haven't, that's okay because there's still another opportunity here. Now let's move on to step four. This is where you now shift the conversation from your initial positioning, where you sprinkle kind of your experience into the context that they're sharing, over to now you're shifting the conversation to their view of how you're aligned. So, in the step right before this, you were like, oh, yeah, let me share just a couple of quick little salt and pepper pieces as far as like how I might fit into your context. But now you might say something like, hey, can I ask you now that we've talked a little bit? I actually have experience in A, B, and C areas, and I would love to be able to make a real impact when it comes to operations and efficiencies. Within the kind of experience that you and I have been talking about, what do you think might be valuable to a company from what I have to offer, like as someone coming out of X industry, right? This is just an example. Yours is going to sound so much different. But what you're saying is, let me give you just a couple of reminders of my experience. Here's what I'm looking to accomplish next. And given this information, what from my experience do you think would be valuable for a company like yours, for a team like yours, in the challenges like yours? And if they see alignment, they're going to share with you a couple of things like, oh, yeah, the skills that you have in ABC are going to be really helpful for a company like ours. Or, I can totally see that, experience from a startup is going to be helpful even in an established organization because we are building new facilities or whatever the case might be. If there is alignment, then you can say, hey, that's really great to hear. This helps to confirm that I'm really on the right track, that these are positions I should be keeping an eye out on. If they don't immediately see alignment, that's okay too. In the conversation, emotional regulation is so important. If you don't necessarily hear instant validation of alignment and the job search maybe isn't going fantastic, it is so easy to get caught up in your head, but so important to remind yourself to get out of your head and back into the conversation. they don't see immediate alignment, probably because they're focused on sharing their story and they're really into the conversation. And that's okay. What you can say if they don't immediately see alignment or don't really respond with too much, you can say, "Oh, thank you for that feedback. I wonder what steps do you recommend to someone like me who's serious about starting in this industry or who's serious about companies like X, whatever their company is?" Right. So you're asking very straightforward information, but you're not asking a direct question about validation. You're asking a direct question about what they recommend to be steps to take. So it takes the pressure, relieves the pressure of them having to share something specific from your experience, but it also brings you really helpful insight. In this response, when they respond to you, you want to look for things that are specific, like specific skills, tools, experience. Maybe there's a short certificate or a quick course or a platform that you need to know in order to crack into this company or this industry or whatnot. So if they give you something that's a little bit more vague, you can ask more questions to get out those skills, tools, certificates, etc. Silence is possible here, and it can get a little uncomfortable. But that's okay because silence is what is happening as the person you're talking to is processing your question and trying to think of something helpful to say to you because we all want to be helpful. So I would encourage you to ask the question, have a cup of water ready. Once you ask it, take a drink of water and just let the silence do its job. And they will almost inevitably share helpful information because that's what we got on this call to share resources and information. All right. So you'll let the conversation go however it may. But as you get toward the end, we're going to get into step 5. That is next steps and follow up. So often we get off the call and we're like, great talking to you. Bye. And that's it. And so what you can do is always keep in mind, what is my next communication with them? This can be as easy as, "Hey, when's the next time we can have a conversation?" It can be as easy as, "Hey, do you mind if I reach out to you in like the next 90 days or so and just give you an update on how it's going?" Just something really, really easy. Doesn't have to be a big commitment. And actually, it shouldn't be a big commitment for them because you're still early on in the relationship. The goal in this next step and follow up section, which is the last like 1 or 2 minutes of the conversation, is to make sure you end the conversation on a high note. So if there was a couple of questions or maybe some awkwardness in between because you're trying to find your way of communicating in this first conversation, or maybe there was a question asked that you're like, oops, maybe I shouldn't ask that question, right? That made them uncomfortable. Regardless, this is your opportunity to bring it back to a high note, a lot of gratitude and appreciation. All right, so goal is end on a high note. Create a reason to follow up, create a next communication, and open the door for them to help. They don't have to walk through it. You just need to open the door. If you don't open the door for them to help, nobody will help because the door wasn't open. If you open the door for everyone to help, there are going to be some people who help, and there's going to be some people who, for whatever reason, can't help. And they're like, "Oh, I don't know anybody right now." So, and on a high note, create a reason to follow up and open the door for them to help. All of this can happen in literally under a minute or two. So when you feel like you're ready to wrap up, or when it's the 25-minute mark of a 30-minute conversation, you might say something like, "I'd love to stay in touch as I continue my search. What would you recommend as the next best way to do that?" Now, that is pretty formal. If you're talking peer to peer and it's an informal conversation, you might say something like, "Hey, I'd love to stay in touch as I continue my search. What if we touch base again in 90 days? What if I reach out to you in a couple of months?" Super, super simple. You want to give them time to respond and then check in for other contacts. So let's say that they say something like, "Yeah, sure, anytime. I'm happy to help," which is what most people would say. You give them time to respond, and then you check in for other contacts by saying, "That sounds great. I will make sure to do that. And I'm still in the research and learning phase, and this conversation has been so, so helpful. I would love to learn from more people in manufacturing who might have other really great career insights in this space. I'm hoping that maybe you might be able to connect me with someone, or maybe tell me who else I can reach out to. Does anybody come to mind?" And then again, take a drink, let the silence do its job, and often people can help connect you with other folks. Regardless, again, we're opening the door doesn't mean everybody needs to walk through, and we have to let go of the outcome. It's totally fine if they don't walk through, but you open the door, and if they walk through, I'll let you finish up because it's positive, it's easy. But if they don't walk through that door, if they don't give you other names and they're like, no, I really don't know, I'm kind of heads down at the office or whatever, that's okay. You still leave on a positive note. You say something like, thank you again, Sally, for your time. This has been so helpful. Would it be helpful if I send you my resume just in case like something were to come up in the future? It's just easy to kind of send off. And they're usually going to be like, sure, because there's no pressure to do anything with it right now. That's the most important piece. You're kind of saying, hey, can I just like throw my resume over to you? And if someday it happened to make its way somewhere awesome, the point is low pressure. Now, again, there's different conversations. If this were a more direct conversation, it's a different story. But in this one, the goal and the whole focus of the conversation was just a conversation, right? So this is why I want to keep this part low pressure. Anyway, so they're probably going to say, sure, I don't mind. Then you can say, awesome, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And if there's any way that I can add value or introduce you to someone or, let you know when I find some things here in the grapevine, like let me know. I'm happy to share that. Okay, so after that conversation, there's always a follow-up. So have an email ready with your resume, or you can draft this right after the conversation. And your email would say something like, I really appreciate your time today. Your insights on X topic, something really specific to what they said and unique to them. Your insights on X topic were incredibly valuable, and I especially loved your advice on ABC. I'll be sure to stay in touch, and I look forward to continued conversations. I'll also attach my resume here just based on our conversation in case you come across an opportunity now or in the future that you think I might be a good fit for. Thanks again for your generosity. Okay, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to attach your resume, but that's pretty much it. Okay, I've gone on for just about 30 minutes, but I wanted to break down that conversation because even though we all know how to have conversations, when we're in the job search and when we know we need to get an offer and we know we're networking for that purpose, something seems to happen. It happens to most of us, if not all of us, where we get in our head and we're like, so how do we actually have this conversation? And I want you to remember at the end of everything else, even if you don't follow this, there's so many different ways to have a conversation. What I want you to remember is that if you're in your head at the beginning of the conversation, that's going to guide how you interact with this person. So the number one thing to do is to remember that you're having the same conversation now that you would have if you were very happy in your job and you were reaching out to someone just to grow your network. The same thing is happening here. Anyhow, I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope it really impacts your next one-on-one conversation. And when you have multiple conversations, let's say 3 to 5 of these conversations a week, your offer is on its way because this is how people help you to clarify your message, to get into the space, to have fantastic interviews, to have good screenings, to learn insights on what people are looking for, to make improvements and adjustments and to tighten up your resume. And yeah, you could also get an invite to an application or find out information about a company that's hiring. All of these things are wins that most people don't expect. Most people go in and they think, I'm here for a referral, I'm here for an offer. But it's those small informational pieces that keep your search alive and get you closer and closer to the win. All right. Again, I hope this was helpful. I'll see you again in 1 or 2 weeks. And until then, know that Denise and I, we're praying for you, we're cheering you on, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.